And so one of the things I realized is that when the university was founded, having all the faculty together would be like 5 people in a room, right? Yeah, and so everything here has grown from that beginning, 125, 150 years. So,
Thank you all for coming here today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules. As we start working toward the end of this academic year, we got a lot of business to take care of, and I'll have a few notes later on about how we're looking at that. A couple of announcements first, and we'll try to repeat them. It's probably a good idea to repeat them at the end, too. The nominations for Senate Vice President / President-elect are still open. And if you recall, the way the Senate works is our Vice President is also elected as President-elect and rolls over into President next year. So Bill Harbaugh, having served his term as Vice President, will be President. I'll pass the gavel to him on May 25th. The elections for certain committees in the Senate itself, is this not working at all?
It's not. It's only you.
Did I not switch it on?
No, we did.
We heard you.
Short timer.
Welcome. I'm glad you could all make it here and take time from your busy schedule. As we approach the end of the academic year, I have a couple of announcements to make. I think I left something out, but that's it. Nominations for, make sure the folks streaming can hear this, because we really want nominees. Nominees for Vice President and President-elect of the Senate are still open. It will also be, we can also take nominations from the floor, but otherwise check in with Bettina as the preferred method. The Senate, for those of you who are not familiar, the Vice President is also elected as President-elect and rolls over into the presidency at the next year. So Bill Harbaugh, having served his year as Vice President, I will pass the gavel to him automatically as succeeding President on May 25th, the last Senate meeting. That is also when that's also the meeting where we have the election for the new incoming Vice President. As I said, we do have a lot of business coming up. I elected to handle it in this way. That we would introduce, and most of it is policies, and policy adoption, revision, repeal. And so that the senators have time to review it, to get feedback to negotiators, to key stakeholders in case they have any revisions that they want to suggest. Before it comes to the Senate floor, we'll take a look for it. You can look for any red flags, anything you want to look at. They will come up for a vote at our next meeting on May 11th. May 11th. That means instead of rushing through them in the space of a Senate meeting, you'll have 3 weeks to discuss them. Hopefully within the next week, there will be meaningful discussions. If there's any discussions, negotiations, feedback that need to happen on these, they will happen. They will come up and be moved on the 11th, on May 11th, and hopefully we'll be able to, the Senate can come to a decision one way or the other, up or down votes, or postponement. The bill doesn't want any of them postponed. And we'll move on from there. So, with that in mind, I will call this meeting to order. Time for the approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from last meeting? Seeing none, the minutes stand approved. Our first order of business is a motion from Frank Stahl. Excuse me. This is this is by Frank Stahl, the Emeritus Professor of Biology. Someone is going to be moving it on his behalf. He can move it. Oh, Emeritus. I'm sorry. Okay. The motion has been moved. Do I hear a second? Senator Bryant, or Senator, let's give that second to Senator Dugas. Let's now read the motion. Section 1.1, whereas the UO Constitution provides the protocols by which the President and the professors shall resolve any differences they may have regarding legislation and policies, and 1.2, whereas the Constitution establishes the Senate as the location for such negotiations, and 1.3, whereas the FAC, which is the Faculty Advisory Committee, a board of presidential advisors, is a de facto branch of the President's office. Joint membership in the Senate and the FAC is likely to result in conflicts of interest. Section 2.1. Therefore, be it moved that the Senate legislation of April 10, 1996, that established the Senate President as an ex officio member of the FAC be repealed. And 2.2, be it moved that University Senate 0506-8, which established the Vice President of the Senate as an ex officio member of the FAC, be repealed. And 2.3, be it moved that beginning with the academic year in which this legislation can first be enforced without disrupting the university's election procedures, no person shall be a member, elected or ex officio, of both the FAC and the Senate, nor shall any member of the Senate attend any meetings of the FAC unless all Senate and faculty assembly members have been notified by email that the said meeting is open. Nota bene, this legislation prohibits the Senate President, Vice President, and immediate past President, as well as other senators, from being members either regular or ex officio of the FAC. And 2.4, be it moved that the Committee on Committees prepare an amended charge to the FAC that reflects the changes instituted by this legislation. The amended charge shall be submitted to the next meeting of the Senate for approval. Date of effectiveness upon passage, financial impact cost neutral, sponsor Frank Stahl, Emeritus Professor of Biology. And Frank, would you like me to read the background, or would you like to give it verbally? Okay. Being moved by Professor Stahl, the discussion will open with him. Professor Stahl.
I'm sorry. The motion before you bears directly on the conditions for governance set by our state charter and the UO Constitution. The charter recognizes that the faculty, who are empowered to govern the U of O, is composed of two bodies, the president and the professors. The Constitution, in turn, recognizes that these two bodies will sometimes have different priorities and viewpoints, and provides a system by which these differences can be addressed and resolved. Section 5.1.2.4 of the Constitution created the U of O Senate, and in so doing, recognized it as the body that would represent the professorial component of the faculty. It did so by declaring that senior administrators and deans shall be ineligible for election to the Senate. In keeping with the spirit of the Oregon Public Meetings Law, the Constitution requires that the proceedings of the Senate, the governing body of the university, shall be open, subject, of course, to certain defined exceptions, personnel matters and such. And giving of awards, as I remember. In support of the philosophy of maximum transparency, the Senate has recently determined that the meetings of most administrative committees shall be open and advertised. No, non-administrative committees, shall be open and advertised. This year, in a warmly contested action, the Senate granted an exception to the Faculty Advisory Committee, henceforth known as the FAC. The Senate appeared to grant this exception largely in response to the expressed desire of a newly appointed university president to have a body of faculty with whom he could discuss his ideas. A very friendly thing to do. Such faculty members would act as confidential advisors to the president, making them de facto members of the upper administration. The Constitution, we have noted, does not allow upper administrators to be Senate members. A likely consequence of the present arrangement is that FAC deliberations will continue to color the proceedings of the Senate. In fact, if appearance of past events gives any view of the future, the FAC as constituted will sometimes distort both the agenda and the debate of the Senate. Thus, instead of being open, governance will continue to be half secret, and the administrative half will continue to have an upper hand. This fatal flaw in execution of open governance is easily and painlessly alleviated by the motion before you. I urge its passage. The motion in a sentence is no joint membership in both the Senate and the FAC. Thank you.
I'm sure there will be some questions addressed to Professor Stahl, so if you can provide him with a microphone, please. Vice President Harbaugh.
So I want to speak in opposition to this motion. I think that I'm looking around the room. I guess we have a quorum, but it's not that big. The simple truth is it's very difficult to get people to serve in shared governance. This motion will make that even more difficult by prohibiting one person to serve in two important bodies. I respect Frank's position on this, and I think, as he knows, I respect his general position on the importance of transparency and openness in the university's governance. I've fought pretty hard for that too. But as a practical matter, I think this is going to do a lot to weaken the faculty's position in shared governance and also the position of the other Senate constituents. I honestly don't see any upside to this motion at all.
May I respond?
Certainly.
Is this turned on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would like to respond, but I couldn't find anything in what you said to respond to, Bill. I'm sorry. It blows my mind. The Senate, if the Senate is seen to be an independent institution with standing of its own to represent the faculty, that is, represent the professors and the rest of the community, and to do so without being under the thumb of the administration, the Senate will attract more membership. The Senate will be the honest, open body called for by the Constitution, on the one hand. The FAC, on the other hand, will continue to serve the president in exactly the way he wants it. That is, he wants a body of faculty with whom he can toss ideas back and forth. He'll still get that. There will still be people who like to chat with the president and discuss their ideas and to respond to the president's ideas. There's very good reasons why these should not be the same two groups of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Marjoram.
I concur with Senator Harbaugh on this motion as well. I feel like this is a debate we had already. And this is sort of a second effort to address the concerns that were raised last time and weren't supported last time either. I trust both the members of the FAC and the Senate leadership to be able to play a role in the FAC and maintain communication between the president and that group, also understand these issues, and also play the role as Senate leadership. I think it's important that this kind of communication goes on. I think this insulating these and separating these would actually decrease the extent of interaction and collaborative leadership that would take place. And I believe for some of the reasons we talked about last time, I would not support this either.
May I respond to that?
Thank you, Senator Marjoram. We'll get back to you at unless there's direct questions, we'll get back to you and let you sum up at the end, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Senator Dreiling.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to once again commend Frank for his commitment to transparency and honesty for this institution, his long, hard work at maintaining integrity in our shared governance apparatus here at the University of Oregon. I, in principle, identify with a lot of the concerns that Frank has raised, not only on this particular issue with the FAC, but in general on a number of issues. This particular motion, though, I find has too many potential unanticipated consequences. I'm not convinced that this is the best route to move forward with this question of the FAC and the confidentiality matters of members of the FAC. I think it's better for the Senate to remain vigilant, to trust right now that the decision that the Senate has made is one that is not permanent. It can be reversed should the reasons for doing so materialize. And I think that there's enough, willingness on the part of this body and other constituencies represented by this body to allow this test to happen as a matter of good faith. And as a matter of good faith in shared governance and the implicit agreements that were laid out by the Senate leadership and Senate itself, as well as the president of the university. So while in spirit, I like what you're doing, I don't see the motion presented to us here as something without potential consequences that could be problematic in the years ahead. So,
will you explain them? What these are?
Well, I think, for example, you're asking to repeal a piece of legislation that's now 20 years old, that is essential to the workings presently of the FAC, and which provide the basis for communication between the Senate leadership as well as the administrative leadership. And I think that practice that was established has only recently been changed. I mean, we only recently instituted an open and transparent model for the FAC to operate, only to then quickly undo it.
Open and transparent for the FAC to operate? It's not. It operates closed.
It has It has indeed operated closed.
It is still
for
closed.
20 years.
Excuse me.
I don't get it.
You don't have the right to cede the
Randy.
floor.
He's speaking nonsense, and I couldn't contain myself.
You'll have to. I will maintain control of this floor.
Thank you.
No
Thank you.
dialogues. If anybody has a direct question for anybody, please ask it as a question. Otherwise, people get to express their opinion.
So may I finish?
What is there?
May I finish?
Oh, yes, please. Sorry for the interruption.
Yes. Thank you, Randy. So the unanticipated consequences, I think, are laid out here very clearly. I mean, we're asking to change legislation that has been in effect for 20 years, and it's not clear to me that this legislation would have the effects that are intended. So for that reason, I don't support it.
Thank you. Further discussion of the motion. Senator Frazee.
Yeah, I have a question about the role that the president and vice president of the Senate play as ex officio on the FAC. Does the FAC actually vote on anything, or is it merely conversation?
No.
What does ex officio mean to the president and vice president of the Senate?
Are you asking that as an informational question, or
I am.
for my opinion?
I am.
No, we don't. We don't have votes.
So I guess what does ex officio mean?
That means we hold it by benefit of holding another office. We are appointed to that council, to the faculty advisory council, as a result of holding an office out of the office ex officio. So,
Right,
since we are president and vice president of the Senate, we get a seat on there.
I understand.
Does that help? Does that help? Okay.
Yes, I know what ex officio means, like by definition. I meant in terms of the FAC at the U of O. Is there a difference between you as president of the Senate in that room versus an elected member of the FAC? If there's no vote, if there is no voting, is there a difference between you and your role in that room versus an FAC member in
Since
that role?
I'm chairing the discussion, I'm hesitant to give
I'll direct it
response
to Bill.
on that. Vice President Harbaugh is in the same position and may speak freely.
No, there's no difference. All the members are treated the same, and there are no votes. Except I think we do make a recommendation about naming certain buildings, but it's advisory.
Senator Parsons.
Hi. I agree very much with the concerns that have been expressed about this motion, and just wanted to add that it would make more sense to me as a motion that came from the president than from the Senate, because if the concern, so that if the FAC is a confidential body that is conceived of as part of the executive presidential branch of the governance structure, and the leadership of the Senate is then participating in it. So the fear, I can understand how the president would say, the leadership of the body that can check me in some way is now present in my confidential deliberations. Which strikes me as a much more reasonable fear if one were to posit an antagonism between these two bodies, than the co-optation of the Senate leadership, that somehow the Senate leadership is, by virtue of being on the FAC, drawn to positions or co-opted in ways that we should be concerned about. That strikes me as a less plausible mechanism, and I think thus it makes sense for Bill and others to say, no, we'd like to be in there. That helps the Senate, if anything, rather than harming it.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Senator Copeman. Sorry, I told you I get amnesia when I step up here.
I have a question for Bill, who just, I heard affirm what Craig just said, that it helps the Senate to have these two ex officio members on FAC. Could you tell us how?
Some people may be aware that it's very difficult to get information about what the university is doing. And in the FAC, I can't say what I learned, but I learned things. And I can't say how I use them, but it's helpful for people in the Senate to know what the university is up to.
So you want us to take it on faith that it's helpful without you being able to spell out any exact way in which it is helpful, or give us a specific example of how it's helpful? That, to me, indicates the dangers of having the kind of closed meeting that we have, and I'm worried about an appeal to the value of the meeting for the Senate when nobody can specify in the room, because of the confidential requirements of the meeting, exactly how that's valuable for the Senate. I understand how it's valuable for you personally, perhaps, in terms of gaining knowledge, but I want to know why we as the Senate should believe that, and why it's valuable for us, on your view.
So I don't like arguments from faith, and I'm sorry if I tried to use one, but I think that it should be easy for people to imagine situations. Use your imagination, please. Think about all the things that go on at the university. I could construct. Yeah, but that would be. I'm not very good at that, so I'm asking you to imagine for me, given that I don't have much imagination. Things that happen at the university, of which the Senate, really should be aware of. Maybe not to make a motion, maybe not to introduce legislation, but just in terms of knowing which direction the university is going and what might happen in the future. Okay, and that I think would be an example of the sorts of things.
Senator Copeman, if you'll hold off for a minute, I'm going to wait and see if anybody else has a discussion point, and then we'll return to you. Is there anybody who hasn't spoken yet who would like to address this issue? Senator Copeman, we'll let you finish up your question and answer session with Vice President Harbaugh, and then we'll be back to you.
Or anybody else would be invited to answer this question, but I think that this exchange has demonstrated the extent to which we have to take it on faith that this is useful for the Senate. I find that difficult to do for some of the reasons that Professor Stahl has laid out. And again, I don't understand how it's useful for the Senate.
Well, without speaking one way or the other in favor or against this motion, I can tell you that as an ex officio member of the Faculty Advisory Committee, I have functioned exactly as a watchdog on it and have said, hold on, wait a minute, this is not a body for policy to be decided on, and have arrested discussions that have trended towards policy making.
Thank you.
We are coming up on the end of the time allotted. I'm going to give it up to to Professor Stahl to finish up. After Professor Stahl is finished up, if anybody wants to move to extend discussion, we can do that. But otherwise, we're going to stick with the agenda. Professor Stahl.
Yes, the Senate should know what's going on at the university, and it's too bad that those people who participate in the FAC are unable to tell us because of the confidentiality of the FAC. It should be pointed out that the Senate is forbidden by the Constitution from delegating any of its responsibilities. The Senate is the body defined by the Constitution to interact with the President. It cannot delegate that responsibility, but in effect, by sending representatives to it, to the FAC, it is in fact delegating a responsibility of finding out what's going on. It should be stopped.
Thank you. Unless someone has a motion to extend discussion, we're going to call the question. Senator Kramer, motion to extend? I see a motion to extend. Do I see a second? I see a second. This will require a 2/3 vote. There is no debate. All in favor of extending the discussion, please raise your placards. Can we get a count? Somebody do the math. 14 out of 53. 14 out of 50, out of 27. That's not a 2/3. But you should count the votes the other way. Okay, against. Sorry. This is against the motion to extend. That is not a 2/3 vote. The question is called. All in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. Can we get a count? Thank you. All against? The 8 in favor, 18 against, the motion fails. The next item of business. We move into discussion. As I mentioned in our introductory comments, this is an open discussion. These have not been moved yet. And again, my reason for doing that is to make sure that when these are moved on the 11th of next month, that we can deal with them expeditiously, because if there are many discussions that can be had with people who see objections or things that have feedback, that you'll be able to deal with and start talking to the people who are leading these discussions, and so that when we come back on the 11th, we'll be able to deal with these expeditiously. The first is a policy repeal of proposals via the Policy Advisory Council and Curriculum Matters Work Group. I would like to bundle these together. They are old OUS policies that are fairly obsolete. A lot of them direct the universities, the member universities of the OUS system, to develop policies of their own in compliance. So they're meta policies in that sense, and in many of those cases, in these cases, we've done that. And so the overall OUS policy has become obsolete. But with the policy turnover, they all became our policies. So this is part of the effort to clean up our body of policies so that it can be useful to the policy users. What I'd like to do is keep these as a bundle if possible. If one of them turns out to be too problematic, we'll pull it out and deal with it separately. And I'd like to try to get through these. For most of these, it wouldn't be the end of the world if we're having problems with it to roll it over. Bill would rather we didn't do that. But otherwise, let's take a look at them. Has anybody can I just get a brief show of hands so I can know how to go through this? Has anybody had a chance to look over these yet? If you have, please raise your hands. Oh, okay, good. So as I go through, I'm going to briefly explain what's up. And if you can see red flags right now, this is a discussion. We'll talk about them now. And since it's a discussion, I'll enter into it and not business on the floor. I'll enter into it because I was privy to a lot of how we got to where we are on this. So I have some information on this. The first one we're looking at is the tuition policy. This one is kind of confusing because if you went to the policy site to look at it, if you follow this link, the first thing you get is current policy statement from the board. You have to go down to the bottom of it, or actually a current resolution by the board. You have to go down to the bottom of it. This is current stuff that was already passed by our board. We aren't voting on that. We aren't voting on that. We aren't voting on this. This is the policy that we'll be repealing. And this deals with the State Board of Higher Education setting, directing the member institutions on how they go about tuition. Our current governing board has authority to set the tuition and have come up with the previous statement of how they're going to do that. Does anybody see any red flags on this about repealing this one? Okay. If during the week you do, give me a call, email me, review it, and if there's something we missed, let me know. I put it up there because it appeared to me that it's ready for repeal, but I could be mistaken. I'm not a policy expert, but we've talked it around. Some policy experts have looked at this, though. Okay, should we move on to the next one? The next one deals with centers and institutes in the OUS, and directs member institutions on guidelines for setting up centers and institutes. We probably haven't been doing this for quite some time. That's true of some of these. In the process of the rollover, we sometimes look at those and go, really? So if you can roll on down. The actual policy. It sets out the appropriate justifications for establishments of centers and institutes. And we have plenty of internal policies for centers and institutes. Faculty and the administration have dialogues over centers and institutes. We have our own way of dealing with this and have for some time. Does anybody see any red flags in repealing this? Okay. The next one is on sustainability. This is, again, an OUS policy directing member institutions on establishing policies and procedures for sustainability. It worked. We did. I know it's kind of scary to look at this one in particular and say, oh, no, we're voting against sustainability. But the fact of the matter is, since this has been voted in, we have a very successful and strong environmental studies program and a very successful and strong sustainability office. So directing us to have courses on sustainability is kind of like directing us to have courses at this point. It's kind of like directing us to have courses on college algebra. We don't need a policy to tell us that. Oh, maybe we do, huh? So let's scroll on down to the actual policy. Let's scroll on down to the actual policy. Because of the recommendations on establishing courses in teaching and recruitment, the exec committee advised me, and I agreed that this is appropriate for the Senate to consider. It's definitely an academic component of this. You can keep on rolling down. Let's go ahead and look at those 6. They're the core of the issue. Does anybody see any red flags with this repeal? Yes, Senator Kramer.
So it's not exactly a red flag, and I don't know, okay. But
that's why we're doing this.
That's what I thought. So I just wanted to know, why would you repeal it so that you don't have to revise it? Because it's good for somebody to say, well, we should be doing this and as justification, but we have tons of them now. I agree, but I just don't know why you would repeal it exactly.
Okay, yeah, good question. Good question. A couple of things I've heard on is, number one, this is goal statements, not policy. And so maybe we could redo it as a resolution. The Senate resolves some of these things to be case, which we can do at any time. Yeah, but I see what you're saying, and just my thought on it is, these are goals. We can agree on the goals, and this is like saying, hey, we should celebrate Mother's Day. Nobody's going to argue against this. If we want to do, but it isn't policy. It's goals. And we've kind of written some of this into the into our environmental policy. Yeah. Okay. There we go. So yeah, we've like most things, OUS directs us to do this. We wrote it into our policy. We've kind of adopted this. We might want to take a look. Steve Mittal is here. See, you thought you weren't going to get to speak. He's the head of the Office of Sustainability. I think on my email I might have misquoted a little bit and said that he recommended repeal. He didn't. If I can put some nuance on that, you didn't feel that it was your position to recommend or not, but he did say that if I can, that well, 5's not academic in nature, and that the repeal of any of these would not make a difference in how any of these things are done on campus. Am I quoting you correctly on that? You want to talk on your own about this? Okay. Senator Dreiling.
I just have a clarification question. The Office of Sustainability is fairly new, and it's great to have Steve here to address the question. My question is, I understand there's a mandate by the office to establish a comprehensive environmental policy, and my guess is that it would be more comprehensive than this. Is that the aim or intention behind that? And will it go through the administrative procedures with the PAC? Do you have, in other words, the office will be developing policy that will be university-wide policy, but will eventually work its way through the Senate as that happens. Am I understanding this correctly?
Well, can I get the procedural part of it? Academic matters related to the policy will find their way
as it
here.
Impacts academic matters.
A lot of
we will see it.
administrative stuff is not going to.
Great.
Or operational stuff.
I understand.
Well, I lost the gist of the question there, but in any case, when I was asked to review this several months back, there, as Randy has pointed out and is up there on the screen, there are 6 points. Number 5 appeared to me to be the only one that was administrative in nature, and it says, let's see, I have a copy of it here, make our campuses, facilities, and events models of sustainable design, construction, and operations, excuse me, meeting or exceeding national and international performance standards. So that has that's a very operational kind of concern, and the Office of Sustainability was set up to help manage those types of concerns, administrative concerns, and advise and work with faculty on research agendas if they so chose to, or help set up develop courses or create modules within courses, but not to strictly take responsibility for that. So looking at the policy, we said, well, number 5 falls under administrative concerns, and we do have a comprehensive environmental policy that in a much more robust way deals with those compliance issues. So we pulled that one out, had the Environmental Issues Committee, comprised of faculty, staff, and students, review it, and they said, yes, the existing policy that we have is better than this one. And then we referred the remaining pieces, numbers 1 through 4 and 6, to the Senate. I was asked a few months back for my own recommendation, what would I suggest as a launching point for your debate, and I said that we have a thriving sustainability culture, as far as I can tell, on the academic side, and there's lots and lots of examples. I won't go through them. It doesn't seem to me that any of it was done in response to the OUS policy. My guess is nobody was even aware of the OUS sustainability policy. It's not long-standing, by the way. It was only developed in 2010. So in my view, it's a bit of a libertarian view, I suppose, but why have a policy when nobody knows about it, when there's a culture that seems to be thriving without it, and it's written in a way that doesn't lend itself to implementation. These are goal statements.
Right.
So I think it's best to repeal it, and if folks feel that there's some value to codifying it, I would suggest starting over. The one thing that we will continue doing that's not really asked for or demanded
Hold it closer, please.
The one thing we will continue to do is produce a report every couple of years that captures, to the extent that we can, the activities on the academic and administrative side that roughly respond to those 6. So you'll know what we're doing.
Thank you.
And I might add, from the academic side, if we feel that we're not doing the academic components of this, we will, and we want to, which I think we would, this body can engage the administration on a very deep level. It's set up to do that on academic matters that go far beyond just passing a resolution, hey, let's do this. And so we have those mechanisms, and we can develop curriculum, implement curriculum. That's what we do, if that's what we need to do. But it seems to be being done. So anyway, that's my take on it. That's just my take on it. Vice President Harbaugh.
So I fully support repealing this. Steve actually was kind enough to email me about it before a couple months ago, and he runs one of the more transparent parts of the university. I applaud him for that, and I don't think we need to micromanage what he does. So I call the question.
Oh, it's not up for vote. Boy, if it was, this would be so repealed, though. But don't worry, somebody will think of something in the next week. Right. I like your Sasquatch socks. Okay, any red flags here? Yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. Curricular policies and procedures. This is the OUS telling its member universities how to develop curricular policies and procedures. We do that. We don't need anybody to tell us that anymore. Let's scroll through it so we can have a quick look. Has anybody looked this over and see anything that I don't in this? See any red flags? Let's take a scroll through. The only thing I see is that we're supposed to be doing instruction, research, and public service. Which is what our mission statement says we do. Okay, any red flags? Okay, again, look over this. If you have any concerns, let me know during the week. Next, admission policies and requirements. This is actually a stub. The most recent actions at the very bottom, this is it. The most recent actions adopted by the Oregon State Board of Higher Education are cited below. That's lost. It's that document we looked for and couldn't find, whatever's referred to below. But basically, this appears to be the preamble to the OUS policy directing us on how to set our admission policies and requirements. We do that. Anybody see any red flags in this little stub? And that's the last for the repeal bundle. So how about in terms of procedures? Everybody okay with me bundling these for a single vote on May 11th? And again, on May 11th, if anybody wants to divide the motion and pull one out, if you see something that is parliamentarily allowable to do so. That was a mouthful. Senator Frazee.
Well, first, I guess I have a point of information, Randy. If there's, or for the chair, could we, or perhaps this is a parliamentary inquiry, could we suspend the rules to move this bundle now? Why wait until the 11th?
We could. I recommend against it because I have found that this body is wiser over the course of 3 weeks than over the course of 30 minutes. There may be something there that we're not seeing. And I would just as soon folks have a moment, have some time to look it over and do it. And if it goes as we hope, I mean, if we're correct that there's no problems, then we're going to vote on it and repeal these. I appreciate your zest, but I would advise against it. I tried to make that as a policy, and if I leave that as a legacy, I would be happy to. That something shouldn't be introduced and voted on in the same meeting if it all can be avoided. I've seen that in other bodies. You don't see unintended consequences that way. But you're free to make it. Senator, that's my piece of advice. It was no more than advice, though.
Respectfully of the chair, I move that we suspend the rules and move on this.
A motion has been made to suspend the rules to vote on this. I suppose you're going to want to move this as a motion. Okay. Suspension of rules. 2/3. Is it debatable? No, not debatable. Amend. And it is a simple majority. It is a simple majority. That's what my Robert's Rules for Dummies says. Yeah, that's what I'd have thought. Oh, the rules of order. Oh, you're right, rules of order. This is for standing rules and convention standing rules. Never mind. Yes, that will take 2/3. This will take 2/3. That's why it's for dummies. Okay. So the motion has been made to suspend the rules to consider this as a motion. We have Kurt flailing his arm trying to get my attention because something's happening. Oh, is there a second? A second from Senator McGee. There is no debate. All in favor of suspending the rules to consider these at this time, please raise your placards. (16 in favor, all against, please raise your placards. (16) The motion does not pass. Good, my legacy is intact. All right, but I do appreciate. Yeah, right. Well, it still wouldn't have been. Still one short of a simple majority. Yeah, second legacy saved tonight. But thank you for your zeal. It is appreciated. And so now the next two motions we're going to consider are coming out of the. These are from the employment work group, the Senate Employment Policy Work Group. Which, and I listed the members on my email, but since I have amnesia standing up here, I don't have them in front of me. Some very respectable folks. These are part of an effort to unify academic employment policy for the university to make the policies for unrepresented faculty equivalent to those who are represented. So much of the language in these policies has been copied over directly from the CBA so that with the intention that there is complete consonance between the two, including some unclear language. So if you look at some of the CBA language and you say, gosh, that could be, I mean, with all due respect, they did a great job. But if you look at some of the CBA language and you go, gosh, that sure could be written better, it may be, but that would then be creating dissonance between university policy for unrepresented faculty and for represented faculty. We are, of course, we can do whatever we want with it, but just please keep that in mind as we take a look at this. These are quite lengthy documents. Let's go ahead and take a look at academic classification and rank. And we're going to do a quick scroll through. It is lengthy enough. Michael, can you give us a quick heads up on what's going on? So, sorry, that was totally unexpected. You worked a lot on this.
Yes, Michael Dreiling here. The language here is derived from a new article in the second CBA. So it's kind of like a circulatory process of revision going on here. The first CBA borrowed largely from the policy at the University of Oregon on faculty classifications and ranks. And that was implemented into the first collective bargaining agreement with United Academics and the University of Oregon. The second CBA, which was negotiated beginning a year ago and concluded in the early fall of this academic year, made significant revisions to that university policy, initiated in many ways by the university administration. There was a robust dialogue at the bargaining table over this process for this particular article for quite some time. I will say that there are issues there that are still unsatisfying to me and that need to be resolved and corrected. We're discovering things along the way. So this is an evolving document at the CBA, and it's meant to be a living document. And so what we have here, of course, is set for 3 years. And it is an improvement, I think, over the previous policy language that was the basis for the first CBA, as well as the kind of the classifications that non-tenure track faculty and the reclassifications that non-tenure track faculty went through. So all in all, I think it's a pretty straightforward transposition of that second CBA language into the policy language here that we see. So, and it is, we're starting with a classification scheme basically, and then moving into categories and then ranks within categories, so that we have basic broadcast classifications of faculty, and then categories within those classifications, and then ranks within those categories. So professors, being obvious example, are in the classification of tenure track faculty. And then the category would be, within the professor, and then we have assistant, associate, and full, and so forth, and emeritus. So that's what we see in this document here, is the elaboration of those classification schemes.
Thank you, Senator Dreiling. Did you see any red flags, Senator Dreiling, when you were looking at when you were reading through this? Oh, come on, you can't leave us with that. And this, that's one of the situations I was talking about. That, sometimes you have to be ambiguous if you're going to get anybody to agree on anything. Oh, you did not get heard by anybody in our vast streaming audience, which actually there's quite a few. Please remember to grab the mic next time. Sorry.
All I was saying that there's a separate classification for retiree, and it has ambiguities that I think need to be resolved in future bargaining sessions, as well as, or potentially in future negotiations or conversations between United Academics, the Senate, possibly as well as the administration. But that's down the road.
Okay. So, yes, Senator Connery.
Hi. In my quick reading of this, one of the words that popped out at me was emeritus. I didn't see the reference there. I saw it crossed out as part of the older ones, but I didn't see it as a new classification. And I'm wondering if that might even be an example of where the CBA doesn't cover an emeritus rank, but maybe it is something that the university would be granting. So if you could maybe qualify or comment on that.
Well, good. This is exactly why we're doing this a week in advance. This one, too, we'll be looking at. So sometime over the next week, let's get together with the folks in academic affairs and see what happened to emeritus and how that's going to be in there. You know?
Yeah, the emeritus is a title that's conferred upon a faculty member after retirement through academic affairs, and so there's a separate process associated with that that's not under the CBA, and so it's probably something we should ask academic affairs, as you just pointed out, to address, or at least explain to us why that is not included in this policy or in the CBA language.
Because it is an academic rank, and if nothing else, cross-reference to a different policy.
Right.
Yeah. Good. That's what we're looking for. Any other issues that people see in this? Yes, Senator Copeman.
I have a point of information, and if this is too much into the arcana of process, just tell me to, let's move on. But I'm curious about the process when CBA negotiations and agreements end up requiring a change in policy, and if there is consultation with the Senate on the side of the administration when those policy changes are required, or are there official senators at the table in a capacity as senators? How does that work? Does anybody know? I ask because it strikes me that we're changing a policy that was changed by the CBA. So until this policy gets changed, the CBA is it's not consistent with the existing policy.
Yeah. And since CBA is statutory law, it takes precedence over this policy for represented faculty.
And it's in
contract law, excuse me.
Right. And I think the question is relevant because at least one of the parties to the agreement, the CBA, is the university. And if the Senate has some say or control or legislative input into some of these policies, then the Senate needs to be involved in CBA agreements that change policy that Senate has input on, I would think. Am I incorrect about that?
No. I mean, I think welcome to the world of faculty unions. My take on this is we're working this out. I think there was a good consultation during the process, but to the extent that needs to be formalized, Michael, what do you say on that? So Senator Dreiling.
Yes, we have, the Senate has created a position for a Senate liaison with the United Academics in that role. I don't know if that's presently filled, but that faculty
I think it's you.
I am. I think it was. I thought it was Gina Psaki, actually, who was appointed to that position.
Okay, cool.
But that position, I think, that person is responsible for those the correspondence around these kind of issues. The other thing to understand is the CBA both embodies policies in the sense that policies are literally mimicked in some of the language in the CBA and revised in deliberation, but it also protects existing policies that are not the subject of a particular article in the CBA. And so one of the points I think you brought up here, Colin, is does a policy that's actually modified under the contract law provisions of the CBA, yes, a policy that is then, let's say we use, the administration or the faculty members and the bargaining team say we want to modify, let's say, the classification process or sabbatical leave, which is the next policy we'll be talking about here, and say because we think there needs to be more financial support for a faculty member on sabbatical, and we want to negotiate that. So that process begins, obviously, a negotiation over that, but in the end, the article in the CBA trumps the policy, and that's spelled out specifically in Article, I believe, 6, of how certain policies are either trumping the CBA or vice versa, how the CBA, in fact, exceeds the authority of certain policies. And so that's rooted in contract law as well as specific articles within the CBA that give power to certain policies and policy instruments at the university. So I don't know if that addresses it, but it's a rather complicated back and forth that I think is needed, and that's why we do need a Senate liaison with United Academics and vice versa, so that these kinds of issues are clarified before we even get to the negotiating process.
Yeah, I think that's politically that's the key, and making sure that the Senate remains a player at the table. Otherwise, our influence is limited to setting policy for unrepresented faculty.
That's right.
And I think we want that. Senator Copeman.
Just a short follow-up. So the liaison position sounds like part of what I was thinking about, but the question was really more directed at the Senate having a liaison to the university bargaining team. If the university is going to change policy that Senate has, by the university constitution, control over or at least input into?
That is a very interesting question, and on that point, we're going to move on. No, not meaning to shut you down, but we have 35 minutes left, and during that time, we're going to be looking at the mandatory reporting. I have to get there. Good discussion on that. Yeah. And again, I seriously don't mean to shut that down. That's the beginning of a good discussion. Let's have that. And on that note, can we pull up the sabbatical policy? And having looked at the clock, I would like to point out sabbatical policy was a parallel process, so I would like to spend time looking at, spend the remaining time we have looking at the responsible employee policy. Unless anybody sees on this, you might want to take a look. Law faculty are unrepresented, and so the law faculty and on semesters. So there's some stuff on law faculty there. If you're in the law faculty and concerned about that, or if you have some issues with that, let's make sure that you're talking. Well, give me a call and get to the right folks that we can have a discussion on that, if that's the case. Senator Peterson. Can you start over again with the microphone?
Quick informational. Is this on?
Mm-hmm.
One of the informational questions I had was the percentages of salary was redlined, and this was throwing more financial money towards one-term leaves, one-term sabbatical leaves, and not others. Is that something that's genuinely up for debate in this at this stage, or is that essentially an attempt to bring it in line with something that's already been negotiated? And is,
I believe that's to bring it in line with the CBA.
Okay.
And we're always free to recommend that they pay them more than the CBA for unrepresented faculty, but I think I see a law faculty member that
I'd be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, but then again, we'd have some people coming back and going, so yeah, I believe that's a CBA related change.
Can you confirm that, Michael? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. 100% salary for the first term of sabbatical leave is something we negotiated in our CBA, and that language is being. There's been an agreement with academic affairs to extend that language in this employment working group of the Senate to unrepresented faculty. So faculty who are not represented by the CBA will have that additional compensation for a one-term leave.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before we get into the next, is everybody okay with moving on now? Before we get into the next policy for discussion, and again, this is discussion, it is not being moved, which is going to be the policy on responsible employees. Keep in mind that this is a discussion only. It hasn't been moved yet, and again, the same process. I suspect that there might be some robust discussion on this, and we may or may not reach a general consensus before there is a divide on it, a vote. But let's at least start that process now and start the discussion now. I should make a note on the agenda. It had listed that we were going to get a report on academic continuity. The co-chairs of the academic council asked that we defer that until our May 11th meeting while they get some further input to finalize that report. And so we honored that. I'd like to take that time to divest UO has a few statements it wants to make to us, or a short report it wants to make to us. And so the time on the agenda will be allotted to them if there is no objection. But you can make an objection at that time if you wish to. Meanwhile, let's continue with the discussion. How many people have had a chance to read over the responsible employee policy? Okay. I suggest this is a very crucial policy coming out of the Committee on Sexual and Gender-Based Violence. It has been forwarded to us on a divided vote. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Never mind. Straighten me out, Carol. Sorry. Oh, it's in the mic.
Two things. First, is this on? Because I'm a loudmouth, I can just yell anyway. Two things. In the committee itself, I don't think it was that controversial. So it's unfortunate that you set it up in a way that already makes it seem divided and divisive. And two, it was not a divided vote. Kurt, what was the final vote on it?
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. There was some robust discussion, and I retract that.
Thank you.
Completely.
Thank you. I mean, we worked very hard on this policy, and there are a lot of people who worked very hard on it over the course of 4 months, so it's important to preface the discussion with the knowledge of that.
Thank you for catching me on that. I humbly apologize.
You're
welcome. And will you open the discussion?
Yeah, sure. What do you want me to say about it?
You got the mic.
Okay. Well, let me put my laptop and my empire of paperwork down. I guess I'll just start by saying that we wrote this policy, and I know that there's some discussion about us not having drafted the policy, but the committee wrote the policy. We met, we discussed it, we discussed several elements of it many times. It is a controversial policy around college campuses, responsible reporting. I think that I can speak from my perspective on that, and one of the reasons why I support the responsible reporting policy is that over the course of the years that I've been doing work on this, I think what I've seen time and time again are reports not getting into the hands of administrators. I think that this is one of the things that has allowed serial perpetrators to sexually harass women on college campuses around the country. It's finally gaining national attention. I think a responsible reporting policy helps us all by showing the people who are sparking across units and across departments, in residence life, and so on and so forth. We came to a compromise at the beginning that I think is really important to note, too, that this is a policy that does give survivors a lot of choices. They have the choice, for example, to go to crisis intervention and to talk to them confidentially about what happened to them. And what I liked about this policy, and this is something that I've seen on campus again and again over the last 3 years, are the cases that go really bad are often cases where people don't get put in touch with resources right away. And when they don't, really bad things happen. Crisis intervention can do things that faculty don't know about. They can help survivors. They can put them in touch with resources. They have this whole sort of menu of items that few of us really know about. And so the responsible reporting policy not only ensures that survivors and people who've been sexually harassed get put in touch with the resources and do it in a confidential fashion, but it also helps with the reporting side of things and with making sure that people who have histories and patterns of harassment and sexual violence are being held accountable. So I'll just leave it there, and if anyone has any questions about the specifics of the policy, I hope you'll read it. We worked hard on it. I think that it's a policy that is a university we can be proud of, and I, for one, support it. Yes?
Thank you. Senator Murray.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jimmy Murray. I'm a classified staff senator. I'm the student supervisor for the math and science libraries, and I have 25 student employees. Bettina, could you scroll down to section D? Like I said, I have 25 student employees in varying levels of leadership over other student employees and over spaces used by students, faculty, and staff. And I just wonder why we want to exclude student employees.
Could I turn this over to my colleagues in the Office of General?
Yes. Is there someone who would like to answer that question?
Yeah.
So, Missy Matella, General Counsel's Office. The exclusion, so I guess just to sort of point out, and you probably have already looked at this in detail, but the exclusion relating to student employees should be read in concert with the definition of student employees. So not all student employees are excluded. It's just those student employees whose employment is contingent on student status and who are not RAs or residential advisors are responsible employees. So if they're in the dorm and they're living there, a lot of times actually that's our frontline response system. And GTFFs are also not included. But it does pick up a big bucket of student employees. And that was in response to a lot of good conversations that we had in the committee about these student employees that are sort of put in this hard position where they're working the front desk at the rec center or they're working in other positions, and they're really students, even though they are employees for this limited amount of time. And so therefore they've been placed in a difficult position in terms of having to report like an employee or like someone who's otherwise sort of not a part of that student body population. And based on the OCR guidance about who a responsible employee is, and that is someone who basically a student would believe has the responsibility to take action, we didn't feel like those students, those 18 to 22-year-olds, for the most part, you know, undergrads that are working the front desk of the rec center, are people that students would actually think could take action, right? Students don't look at those student employees like they look at other employees or faculty members. So we felt like we had an argument to exclude it, and a lot of folks on the committee felt like it was a necessary exclusion based on sort of interactions that they've had with student employees. That being said, I think that's something that there could be more discussion about, but that was the thought process from the committee on making that exclusion.
So can I follow up real fast? My only comment would be that I worry about a situation where someone might behave in a way because they know that they're around student employees and not around other people. And I would hate to think someone feels safer to act inappropriately because the only people watching them are student employees. Thank you.
Senator Frazee.
Yeah, I think I would echo Senator Murray's concern, particularly because the example that you gave of somebody working at the rec center or perhaps somebody, a barista behind the counter and versus an RA are two very extreme different types of student employees. On the other hand, there are students within that spectrum that have a great deal of vulnerability in their capacity as a student employee. For example, our outdoor program staff go on these outdoor adventures where there are campfire vulnerabilities expressed. My student orientation staff, for instance, I would volunteer. My student orientation staff provides ample opportunity for new students particularly to be vulnerable about a situation, and I would expect my student orientation staff in their capacity as an employee of this institution to report some of those things. So I fear that this exclusion of student employees with the exception of RAs is too vast of an exclusion, as it's currently written at least. I absolutely agree and hear that those giving out towels at the rec center might not need to be included, but there are lots of different levels of student employees where I would hope that they were included in this reporting responsibility.
Can I say a couple of things? This is open discussion. I'll get back to you.
Well, this reminds me of the discussion we had about classified staff, right? We initially had thought about excluding classified staff or some classified staff and made a decision at the end that it sent a really important message to the community to include classified staff. So, I mean, this is, we were going by kind of the letter of the law, when we excluded student employees, but we could decide as a community that we think it's important enough to include them.
I completely agree with that. I think it's a choice that, you know, the campus can make to include more people as responsible employees. And, you know, we could just have the only exclusion from responsible employees being confidential employees, which there's another definition that sort of, I think, cites to all of the confidential employees that people mostly know about, right? So the counseling center, the health center, the crisis intervention center. Our only exclusion could be those employees. That's possible, and I think up for debate and good discussion.
Yeah. I did want to point out, just as a matter of process, what I've been observing is for many, and I guess this is what I was getting at very ineptly at the beginning, there's a lot of the choices and decisions that the committee has made and we are going to have to make are difficult in the sense that either choice we make, there are costs and benefits. I know on some of this we were talking about, for example, excluding some, making a definition, a functional definition for employees, whether they worked with students or not. And one of the things we're thinking is when you start making too fine a definition of it, some people may be confused as to whether they are not they are considered to be reporters. So sometimes wholesale inclusions. The benefit of it is a person is very clear. If you have an entire class of that is designated as being responsible employees, there's a clarity and there's an advantage to that, but there's a cost for it, and that's similar to many of the decisions that we've been making. They're tough decisions. That's all I'm saying. So there are often costs either way you go. Carol, you had oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Renee Desotella, Director of Crisis Intervention and Sexual Violence Support Services. And so I just wanted to know, I'm curious about whether or not whether or not it's built into a policy, but particular units who have student workers who have a unique connection with students where we feel like it would be important for them to have a reporting obligation, maybe not even obligation, but just really, this is an expectation of your role that you connect with staff around these issues. The staff will obviously be required reporters under this policy, that it can be something that's individualized to the program, maybe not built into policy, but something as an expectation when you hire students. I don't know if that's something that'd be possible, but maybe that's a way of figuring out some of these pieces, because this creates a lot of anxiety for students. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really does. We have students working the Women's Center, the LGBTQA, who have these. They're an employee, but these are all their friends. These are all of their roommates, the people they spend their lives with. And so the lines about whether or not they have to report something is really blurry for them. And I think that it's just a really hard thing for a lot of our students.
Senator Marjoram. Oh, right there.
Yeah, I really appreciate the work put into this document from the committee, and I may be confusing things, but I remember before when we talked about mandatory reporting, there was a concern about, and I guess similar to that last scenario, to faculty who may have may be sought out for these kind of incidents, that if they're required to report that may actually reduce the amount of reporting because of the fear of that, not having control of that process. I'm just wondering, was that addressed in this policy, and how the committee sort of dealt with that issue? And I'm not saying I'm for or against it, but I just remember that coming up before as a concern.
Carol, would you address that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is part of the national discussion around responsible reporting, and we talked about it a great deal, and there were divergent opinions on this. I can tell you what my opinion was, and I think what the consensus perhaps of the committee was, and that is that, I advise a lot of graduate students. I work closely with graduate students. I don't see the sense in having graduates. I don't consider my relationship to graduate students to be the relationship of a priest in a confessional. And I'll say that straight up. And I've seen too many times where that becomes a problem. I always encourage kind of mentoring networks and lateral mentoring among my students. I encourage them to open up and talk to lots of different people and get lots of different advice. I think that my experience with with graduate students in particular who've come to talk to me about sexual harassment is frequently they come to me after they've had unsatisfactory experiences with the institution. So they've already disclosed. And the students who come to me beforehand want me to do something, right? They're not there because they want to just like talk to me, and the bad thing has already happened to them, right? They're already traumatized. So I feel that instead of having them tell their story to me, and then I have to walk them somewhere else, they have to tell the story another time, and then they tell the story another time. I feel like the policy that we have in place where I can say to a student, because you know when students are coming to you to disclose something, I can say, you know, I am a responsible reporter, and this is what it means, and this is why I believe in it. If you've been harmed, I can walk you over right now to crisis intervention, and you could talk to someone confidentially about what happened to you, and they can provide you with the kind of resources you need to navigate this really difficult situation. I mean, I don't think that that chills speech. I think it's different if you say to your students, hey, you know what, if you tell me anything, I'm going to have to go to the boss. Right? I think it's a lot of it is about the way you frame the conversation and about what kind of outcome you want to have. I want my students to finish. I want them to finish graduate school, and I can't make the accommodations that are going to let that happen after they've already been harmed. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Thank you. Senator Bonine.
Is this all right? That's working. My name is Joan Rockland. I'm here because Senator Bonine could not be. I'm a faculty member at the law school, and both Senator Bonine and I have a concern about that position. Carol, Carol stated that the policy does not require you to go to the boss, and that's not what it says, but that does seem to be what the policy requires. It requires us to report, and then it says that the institution will take action. What that seems to do is take away agency from the individual student. There isn't anything in this policy that once it's reported that the student, the victim, will have any control over the response. It just says the university will take prompt and equitable corrective measures. So as a faculty member, to me what this policy does is it takes away that agency from the person who has been a victim, and it, I believe some other people have expressed the opinion that it then reharms the victim. And I'm concerned about that. My office is open. I have students in my office regularly crying about different things in their life. It's a safe place for them to come and talk. And if they begin to open up, then they lose complete control over their story and what happens next. At least that's how I read the policy now. I also wanted to mention that Merle Weiner, a professor at the law school, wrote a memo that I believe will be circulated to all senators. And in that memo, she's raised a number of concerns. One is that the policy doesn't address attorneys in the domestic violence clinic, who should also be, they have professional responsibilities to be confidential. She is concerned that the reporting obligation is too broad or ill-defined, in that the policy, she believes, is intended to refer to only interactions between UO employees and students, or UO students and students, but it's not always clear on that point. And so if there was an incident involving a non-UO person off campus, it's not as clear as it could be about what the reporting obligations could be. She lists a number of definitions that are inconsistent or create gaps. But you can read about that in more detail in her memo.
Thank you.
Randy, could I make a quick response to that?
Yes, please.
Because I think that that's one of the things that we discussed in the committee itself at great length, was survivors' agency over the process and the extent to which they could determine if they wanted, for example, a complaint to go forward. And, you know, I can let Darcy talk about what that process looks like, but it's not as if they go in and they talk to someone and they immediately go forward with a complaint. Now, if there's a threat to public safety, if there's a possibility that the student might harm themselves, these are all cases in which we override confidentiality anyway. But I think it might be good. Darcy, would you be willing to speak to that quickly?
Just a moment. I do want to point out that we're coming up towards the end of our discussion section. Keep in mind, this is the beginning of this, the discussion on this, not the end of this. Please look at the Senate website, and we will get a blog started on this. Let's continue this discussion. Yes, go ahead, Darcy.
Thanks. Darcy Heroy, Interim AVP and Title IX Coordinator. Carol, I think, explained this pretty well before, and I'm happy to talk about this in more depth, but part of the processes and protocols that we have put in place have been in a real attempt to funnel information as quickly as possible to confidential resources such as crisis intervention, and that was very deliberately done as an attempt to try and give people who've experienced sexual violence or harassment as much agency in the process as possible. So there are some cases, I think it's transparent to say that a student may not ultimately have control over what happens. We have seen that sometimes in the past, but it's a minority of the reports that come in. And those are cases where we're looking at balancing the interests of the larger campus community and the individual student. So there may be a case in which a student reports something. They may not want to go forward with the process with an official complaint or a conduct process. We convene a risk assessment team to analyze the facts of the case in a de-identified manner, to look at the factors that OCR has given us for guidance on these, as well as our health and safety standards for emergency action, to determine whether or not we need to intervene. And those are very deliberative processes, and we take that very seriously. It is not the majority of cases. It's a minority of cases where we're undergoing that analysis. But I do think it's fair to acknowledge that that may, in some cases, even if it's a small percentage, happen. That being said, a student is never forced to participate in a process, so they can choose not to participate, and that may have effects on what the institution is able to do as a response moving forward, but someone is not forced to participate when they don't want to, so I think that's also important to acknowledge. Part of the point in required reporting, as far as I'm concerned, is also to make sure that we are able to track patterns in behavior. So I'm also interested in some of the other reporting options, and I've been talking with Jennifer Fried about this as well, like Callisto, which give students the ability to report anonymously and then also help us have the ability to track patterns in behavior when that is then submitted to the institution. So I don't think it's an either or necessarily. I do think that the law has been pretty clear on required reporting, and I actually believe in it as being very useful in stopping perpetrators. At the same time, I think we can augment that with other options and maybe do research as well to figure out what might be preventing people from reporting and how to address that as well. I also think it's a function of making sure that our response institutionally serves those students really well. So part of the problem I see in fears about reporting is fears about what happens after that. So the larger question to me beyond reporting is how can we make sure that our processes are adequately addressing the students' concerns and not making them have more negative experiences on top of that. So I hope that answers.
We're getting close to the end. We're going to have to continue this conversation later because there's how long?
I just had two quick things that I think would be helpful for people to know really fast. So
make them quick, please.
If you're interested. If you're interested in knowing the processes that Darcy was talking about, I really invite everyone to take a look at the Student Conduct Code website. There's a link that's called Sexual Misconduct Standard Operating Procedures, and it goes through the whole process, including the agency process, about how we make a determination about whether to move forward or not, and the fact that we do respect the wishes of complainants when we can. That's really important. And I guess the second point is that the policy actually intentionally covers more than just U of O students and employees. It covers everybody who participates in a campus program, all of our visitors here on campus. All of that is picked up by a lot of these discrimination laws, including Title IX. So it's intentionally broader than just students and employees because, frankly, our campus community is broader than that.
Thank you. Senator Allen, I know you've been waiting. I'm so sorry. Well, can you I would like to invite everybody who's been speaking to especially the folks who have been answering questions. Keep an eye on the Senate blog so that we can get issues worked out and see where we need to go with this and have a clear direction on it. Go ahead, Senator Allen. You've been waiting.
Thank you. So I just had a suggestion for an addition. I don't believe we need to vote on it this time, but correct me if I got that wrong. Towards the end of the policy, it lists...
Oh, actually, can I get you to submit any changes in writing and suggest them on the blog? This is not a time. This is for open discussion. It's not a time for amending or suggesting amendments to the text.
I did submit written comments in advance.
Oh, cool. Well, that we'll get to when we vote to it. But can you give the gist of what you want to change?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Under confidentiality exemptions, my suggestion is that we have
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
An exemption for union stewards acting in their official capacity.
Okay. Thanks. That's right. I remember that. Thanks. Okay. Thank you. I did promise Senator Fried that I would read some of her comments. She served on the committee, and I should read these into the record. I feel I have failed to express myself clearly, and for that I apologize. I have a few thoughts to share on required reporting. I apologize. These points are not now informed by the discussion of the meeting yesterday, but perhaps some or all will be still relevant for the future. 1, a fundamental injury of sexual violence is to take away the survivor's autonomy and control. Anything we can do to offer autonomy and control to survivors will be potentially healing. Anything we do that takes it away will be potentially harmful. I say based on research. 2, when we draw conclusions about what reporting environment works based only on those students who report, we are losing data from 90% of survivors. We need to always asking about what the 90% that are not reporting. What can we do to make it safe for them to get their needs met? Why are they not reporting? 3, while the GC office has the duty to protect the university, a committee such as ours should be fundamentally about excellence, not liability. The whole exercise of addressing sexual violence will fail if simply pursued for the sake of risk management. We should be, as a committee, be looking at how our practices are consistent with overall institutional excellence, the alignment of mission, vision, values in the specific context of sexual violence, and the development of a culture of excellence that will serve the institution at all levels. 4, one way to pursue a culture of excellence is to step back and identify the goals of any initiative and ask whether there are other ways to meet those goals that might be even more helpful and with fewer negative side effects. There's a little bit more, or there is more, and I will post this on the Senate website for it to be read, but we're out of time for now, except for, I'm going to say one comment. The idea of enabling students to have more options by having more confidential reporters embedded, I think is an excellent idea that deserves exploring. However, we need to avoid the hazards of having amateur counselors out there. Any programs that to expand the confidential staff on campus to other sectors need to be vetted. They need to include training, funding, programming. They need to be well-established programs so that we don't do it wrong. That is simply my take on this, and we don't have those in place right now. I think there is a willingness. I've seen willingness to take a look at that. So we have a report now from UO Divest.
Hello. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric. Hello. Okay. Hi, my name's Eric. I came to the Senate meeting about a year ago in January when we voted on the divest resolution originally. And I just want to remind people that that resolution called for a divestment within 6 months by the foundation, and it was passed unanimously by the Senate. Since then, right after that, we met with the foundation itself. They did not want any piece of divestment, and I'm just here to give a quick update on what we've been doing with the sit-in, which has been in Johnson Hall for the last 9 weeks. So I don't know. Okay, so there's a resolution that was passed. The important part is, I think the top part, which calls for divestment within 6 months by the foundation. This was also 6 months prior, students voted 73% in favor of divestment as well on an ASUO resolution. I guess you can go to the next one. Yeah, and then we met with the foundation's chief investments officer, where they told us, I think this is a direct quote, maybe Michael Dreiling would know, but he was there too, but he said that, the foundation is not part of the university, it's a nonprofit corporation, and as such, we cannot take a position on any social cause, and we must maximize our returns for our donors, which is substituted in for shareholders for any other corporation. And, our thoughts on that is that's a pretty, good way to, speed up the destruction of the planet as quickly as possible, but not maybe the best, mindset for a foundation that's supposed to be representing a university that has interest of future generations and students in mind. So maybe go to the next one. So I think week 6 of last term, we began a sit-in on February 16th. That was the day Naomi Klein came in the Johnson Hall lobby. I think it's on to week. This is the end of week 9 right now, yeah. I guess my big announcement is that we're planning on ending the sit-in tomorrow with a mock wedding at the EMU amphitheater between the U of O Foundation, or the U of O, and fossil fuel industries. If anybody wants to come to that, we'll have like a part where people can come up and do their objections, and that's not scripted. So any reason why you think that the university should divest, that would be a great time to talk about it. Go to the next one. We're also going to announce our divestment fund. This is a fund that was set up not really by us, but by other universities that have been working on divestment. By the way, I think that over 50 universities in the U.S. have committed to full or partial divestment from fossil fuels. It's more all the time. I think Yale just partially divested like $10 million from fossil fuels like 5 days ago. Another university divested 3 days ago. So this fund is a way for donors to the university who don't want their money going towards fossil fuel investments to still donate to the university. It's tax deductible, but the foundation doesn't get any of it until they commit to divestment. If they don't do it by, and I think there's 30 other universities involved, MIT, a bunch of others. So that money all goes to a pool. If the university doesn't divest by the end of a certain date, right now it's December 2017, then that money goes to the scholarship funds of all of the other universities that have divested. So in this way, we're trying to push the foundation on the only button that they seem to have, which is how much money they can make, not really, how high the sea levels go and what happens to the Philippines. So yeah, we'll be announcing that as well. And is that it? Oh, also the wedding, which I previously talked about. And yeah, I guess that's it. And we have a meeting with the foundation that's in the works for this June. So hopefully we can get an up or down vote with them. And if, thus far we've gotten, the administration has been nice to us as we've sit in, but still have gotten all no's from them when we're asking President Schill to support divestment. And the foundation has been all no's also, and they haven't even been willing to talk to us, at least the chief investment officer. So we'll see how this goes. If it goes badly, then I will probably do, escalate direct action next year. But yeah, that's my update. So.
So I'd just like to make a pitch for the divestment fund. It's a fiendishly clever idea, well-founded in economic theory. You can go on the website and make a donation. I did, and I was very pleased to see that I got a receipt suitable for sending to the IRS with my taxes.
Thank you. Is there any other business before this body? A couple of announcements. Please remember, and I announced it at the beginning, but just to remind you, again, for maybe some folks on the streaming audience, that we are taking, there's nominations are still open for the Senate Vice President / President-elect that will then roll into the presidency after serving a term as Vice President. And so please either self-nominate to Bettina, or if you want to nominate somebody else, make sure they want to do it first. And the elections will be opening when? On Monday. Elections for university committees and for the Senate itself will be open. So you'll be getting an email telling you to vote. Vote early and often. Senator Copeman.
When I ran for Senate, I asked if senators who are running could be allowed to submit short statements. And I thought that was a good idea, and so did the Senate at that time, apparently. I've noticed that we have not done that since that year, unless I'm mistaken. I'm wondering if we could renew that practice. Otherwise, it's pretty much just a popularity contest.
Oh, okay, for the Senate positions, you mean?
For the Senate positions, perhaps people would want to extend it to committee positions. Perhaps
we have an informed voice at the back.
We sent out the request to all candidates last week to submit statements. The deadline was yesterday, but if you get something in, you're welcome to it. We didn't get very many, but we definitely made the pitch for people to do that.
Thank you. One more. Wait for it.
So I'd just like to make a statement about the search for a new law school dean.
Oh, that's right.
The university has a policy on the procedures to be used for these searches, which includes consultation with the Senate and, since Frank's not here, I can say, and also with the FAC to find the members of those search committees. That policy was not followed, and I'm working with Provost Coltrane to try to fix that situation.
Thank you. Is there any other business before this body? Seeing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you for your hard work.